All right, I believe we're live. Like I mentioned, small stream this week. We only had 5 submissions. Maybe the sample was a bit too tough. I can't be sure what the issue was, but yeah, we got 5 names on the board, so this will be a quick stream this week. Yeah, let me know if my mic is good. Cora, how's it going? I had a feeling the sample may have given some issues. Yeah, I think the end part of the sample was sampleable, but it was a bit repetitious and it was a little bit more strict in terms of how much you can get away with. And yeah, like the drums and the bass line could have been used, but I think people struggle with like layering their own sounds. Deleg, you just submitted. Can you just copy and paste or just paste your link in the chat and I'll just manually add it myself. But yeah, let's quickly check out the audio for the music and then we'll just get going. And let me know if that sounds good. If so, we'll get the show on the road. Yeah, hopefully you guys are having a good Sunday. Whoops. I'm always happy to use the wheel as always. It's always a good time. But yeah, I think maybe using a more traditional sample would have been a good idea. I tried to do something a little bit more restrictive just to see if you guys could make something out of it. It looks like some of the veterans here are the ones that submitted, which makes sense. John, I submitted mine a few minutes ago. Did you get my link or do you need it here? Yeah, just paste the link to the beat in the chat and I'll just add it manually. Or you know what, I can just link you guys and you can just add it. Actually, you know what? That's always a disaster when that happens. So I just paste it in the chat here. I should have threw the individual stems I made from the sample in the Discord. Got a late start though, so I wasn't sure if people were already deep in the beat. Yeah, that probably would have been helpful. Just to take apart the sample just so people have a little bit more of an easy time using it. But yeah, let's just listen to some beats. And yeah, John and Deleg, just feel free to paste your links in the YouTube chat. That should be good. And I might be able to just grab it myself actually. Give me 1 second here. While that's going, maybe we'll play the first beat, but then again I want to listen to and write my thoughts down. But yeah, hopefully you guys are having a good Sunday. Sorry that I woke you up an hour early, Cora. That timer is kind of weird because what it says is like there's 1 hour left until the stream, and then once that 1 hour goes, then it's like 59 minutes. It adds an extra hour to the end of it, which is kind of strange. I think that's the reason why it was throwing me off too. View submissions table. 1 second, guys. All right, Jay Sherb, I got yours. Deleg, I don't see your submission anywhere, interestingly enough. Hopefully the form isn't screwing up again. Deleg says I submitted mine now. I do not see yours, Deleg. That's worrisome. All right, let's just go ahead and listen to the first beat. And Deleg, let me know if you submitted on the website, and if so, I'm not seeing it on my end, so we might need to make some adjustments here. Anyways, let's spin the wheel. That's what we're really here for, guys. Oh, John Sherby is up first. The Sherb man. Well done, Sherb. Big win. He comes in late and gets chosen first. I Don't Dance is the song name. Let's take a listen, guys. right, that was John Sherby himself. A very well put together beat there. Awesome job, John Sherby. It is a bit cloudy over here. I think that's why it looks a lot more dark in my room than before. I have the auto exposure on, but maybe my webcam's also feeling sad that it's a cloudy day, because yeah, it does look dark. Yeah, awesome, cool, jazzy tune there. Delight, could you DM me on Discord and send your link, because I did not receive, or maybe the chat here doesn't allow URLs. That could be an issue, but I didn't see your link anywhere, so just DM me on thingy. If you want another one, I can submit, but it's not mixed and 100% ready, says Moritz. I totally forgot about the stream. You know what? I just realized I didn't remind you guys 2 days ago. I thought the countdown would be a reminder itself, but I should probably have submitted or actually reminded you guys yesterday. But yeah, just Moritz, did you submit in the actual Wix form, or sorry, the website form? Or if you want, just DM me on Discord and I can just manually add it to the list. Deleg, I just got your submission on the thing, so we're good for Delegs. But yeah, Moritz, if you want to add your submission onto the actual website and just submit it there, then let me know and I can just hit refresh. And yeah, anyways, for John Sherby's beat there, I think did a great job of creating his own progression. So he didn't just take the sample and just looped it. That's completely fine, by the way, but I think creating your own progression is like the next step up, and it can be difficult a lot of the times, but I think the Sherb man did a great job of creating his own idea and tailoring the sample around that idea, rather than sort of having the sample itself force the progression. So good job on that front. I think the layers that you added into the beat really integrated well. A great jazzy beat, just like Cora mentioned, and I think all the additional layers that you used really fit with it aesthetic. You sampled the piano mainly, and you sort of used more organic sounds to create a more jazzy beat. At the same time, the spaces in the beat were all full. Great job of adding sounds at different depths, as well as taking advantage of the stereo space. It felt like everything was very full. I really liked the fact that you arranged the different parts in your beat. You had the sort of verse and the hook, and it was very obvious which was which. The integration between the two sections worked really well. That can be something that really throws a lot of people off when they use samples. They just don't like the idea of having to dig and find more pieces to create an actual second section. But I think you did a great job of finding, or maybe you just layered the vocal sample to create something that felt a little bit different. Great attention to the small details for the transitionary sounds as well. I think the only thing that jumped out to me was the horn that you added during the hook was a bit off key. It was definitely a good idea, because what you did was you took a smaller loop for the hook and just play that over and over again. And so adding some variation across like every fourth bar, you have some new sound that comes in. So it was a good idea. It was just the actual sound or sample that you used during the horn was a little bit off key, maybe repitching it, or it just could be that you might need to find a different phrase from a different sample where some of the keys actually fit with the entire beat. Red Octane says, yeah, I have nothing to critique too much. As Deleg said, maybe more variation at the same time. That's the type of beat it was, and would give plenty of room for an artist. Yeah, it took me a while to figure out the direction with that sample. Yeah, I think you did a great job of creating your own direction. That was really well done. It came together Friday night. I think what I would also say is that the high end might have been a little bit, could have used a little bit more color, and just by adding a static layer of sound, or maybe just bumping up how much color the hi-hats or maybe the brighter end of the snare took up. It felt a tiny bit dead, but I will say that I'm still trying to learn my room, so if you guys had a second opinion on whether the high end could use a little bit more presence. But like I mentioned, the spaces in the beat as a whole were very, very well filled and well done in terms of adding sounds into all the right spaces. So this is a really great job, Sherb. I remember your beat from last week was a little bit chaotic, and the different sort of layers that you added sort of sat in maybe suboptimal spaces. And you mentioned that you accidentally like uploaded a different mix maybe or something. I'm not sure what happened, but I think this is a great step forward. And I think it's awesome. Whenever you're in the chat, you always give great advice, and your beats are reflective of your amount of knowledge. So that's awesome. Yeah, after my mixing fiasco last week, I try not to do too much. Yeah, it definitely showed that everything that you used here was very smart and very well done. You didn't try to shove and experiment and do very strange things. I think it definitely paid off because this was a complete, well put together beat that sounds great. We're spinning though, guys. This is what matters most. Ooh, Moha's up next. If you guys remember, Moha had that awesome beat last week or last stream. That was fun. Moha's got the beat for us that we're going to be listening to now. All right, that was Moha's beat there. Let's go back to the wheel. Let me just finish writing what I was going to say here. I'll just say it. Why am I just writing it? I think the sample flip here was a really interesting approach. So Moha made like a very spacey sounding beat, and the way the sample was used was almost like micro chopping and creating a more pad ethereal like layer that had a lot of repetition, but at the same time it sort of melded together to create a progression. And I think once again it's really awesome that you guys sort of took the sample and remade your own vision using the pieces. Red Octane says, I wish the bass came through a little bit more and possibly a little bit of gentle saturation. Super chill vibe for sure. Mort says, a really great vibe, but the vocal sounds a little bit thin. Red Octane, like the use of pitching that vocal up. Vocal sample up a ton. So yeah, I think Moha did a good job of filling up the space in the higher end, and he did so in a very unique way. It sounded like he pitched up the entire sample, and so he had a lot of those piano textures up there, as well as the vocal sample. But just like you mentioned, Red Octane, the low end presence was a little bit thin. Actually, I would say very thin. It sounded like the bass that was used was very, very subby, and so it didn't really have much color. and it was a little bit faint as well. It didn't really come through in the beat. And for the low mid space, that was pretty much devoid completely. So like you mentioned, using some gentle saturation, maybe on the more low end. The bass line could have added more color into the low mid, but I definitely do think that maybe adding like an organ or maybe layering your own piano that sits in that low mid would have definitely made the beat feel a lot more full, because as of right now, it just felt like it was lacking a lot of presence, just because that low end can really provide a lot of that warmth and a lot of that sort of immediate color into your beat, whereas if you have too much in the high end, it starts to feel a little bit cold. And that's the sort of feeling that I got with this beat. It just did not really feel like there was much presence. It was a little bit too floaty. That's because there's that presence in the low end was a little bit lacking. I will say I like the percussion in the beat, the sort of hi-hat layer that Moha made. Really, really awesome texture. I think the one thing that jumped out to me as well, though, was that it was a bit lopsided. So that texture sat all the way on the left side, but there was no texture on the right side that sort of counterbalanced that. So that was like a very highly percussive, highly rhythmic section or layer in the left channel, but there was nothing that was very similar to that on the right channel. I usually find that if you have a sound that sits in a frequency spot and it's sort of highly rhythmic, like a hi-hat layer, which is commonly panned for some reason, it's going to be really important to find something complementary on the other side. So maybe even taking a separate loop and creating something somewhat similar. It doesn't have to be a complete mimic, but just having a little bit more balance would be a great way to get the beat to not sound as sort of lopsided. So interesting idea here, Moha. I think there's a lot of textures that were used to fill up a lot of the high end, and you did so really well, but I think there was a lack, a sort of missing piece in the low mid, and I think that made the beat suffer a little. Yeah, overall, really cool sampling idea, just a little bit of missing spaces that ultimately hurt it. All right, Maury, I got your beat here, so let me add you to the list. Prod by Morris. And we'll add the beat here. Whoops. We're spinning though, guys. Let's spin this up. We've got Deleg. Let's see what Deleg's beat's all about here.
Deleg, let me touch your body. Deleg, let me touch your body.
All right, that was Deleg's beat, a Drake type beat. All right, that was interesting flip. The Red Octane says, like the use of the vocal as a droning pad type of sound. John says that bass definitely can feel that through the speakers. Yeah, it's definitely something that I enjoyed about the beat as well. Really cool flip. I like the fact that he found different pieces of the sample to create some variations. So every fourth bar, he used that different chop at the end of the fourth bar just to create something different. The sort of, it sounded like the technique that was used here was reversing the sample to, just to push it into different ways, which is really awesome to see that it wasn't just a very straightforward flip. Awesome to see very sort of out there production techniques used here. The vocal sample was a nice layer of detail. I will agree with what you guys are saying in the chat, which is it was a nice layer of detail, a great way to sort of add variation and make the beat feel a little bit different. I do feel like at points it did stick out a bit. I think it might be, I'm not sure whether it's the fact that it might have been off key or whether it was just nasty frequencies that sort of jetted out. I might have personally cut out a little bit more of the low end out of the vocal sample just to make it a little bit more airy, a little bit more spacey, and maybe throw it back in the beat a tiny bit, just because there were times when it felt like it sort of stuck out in a bad way. Overall, I do think that although I appreciate that the sample was sort of pushed in order to create a little bit of variation, and there's a vocal sample as well, I would have liked a little bit more of a substantial change to the beat in terms of the arrangement. It was pretty much the same loop over and over again, and when you use samples, it definitely does become harder to figure out how to create different sections of your beat, just because a lot of your sounds are a lot more static. You can't really take sounds away from the sample and then add your own as easily. But I definitely do think that's a skill that's really helpful and necessary to learn. Even if you use loops that are from like Splice or something, learning how to add your own sounds on top of loops and samples is something that's really necessary. So I would have liked to seen a little bit more of that out of this beat, in terms of just help using that type of tool and that technique in order to build different sections of your beat that sounds a little bit more substantial would have been nice. Overall, good core idea. I just would have liked it to be pushed further in terms of the arrangement. I think Deleg has a good foundation in terms of putting together a core loop that sounds good. I would like to see a little bit more with arrangements though. Let's get to spinning. How about that, guys? Ooh, we got Nerldy's beat. Nerldy is known for the experimentation, so let's see what Nerldy comes up with. right, that was a Neuraldy's beat there. Neuraldy pushes the envelope. I always like hearing what Neuraldy's got because it's not like I ever know what I'm gonna get, but I know it's gonna be something that's a bit more unique, which is awesome. So a tale of two halves with this track for sure. So definitely came together fairly well for a second when the piano came in and some of the perks dropped out. So that's what we're building up to. Like this second half much more, and there's more clarity as to what's going on for sure, says Red Octane. So yeah, I got the exact same sense as you guys, where it's definitely like a tale of two halves here. In the first half, my sort of thinking was this needs a little bit more musicality. It was basically just drums as well as this very prominent drone that was very monotone. Definitely a good bedrock for an actual full-on song, just because this, from my take, this isn't meant to be a instrumental that's rapped on. It's supposed to be a house track that's a song on its own. So yeah, the first half it felt like there was a good foundation, but there just was not, and there wasn't any progression. So once the bass line finally came in, that's when things finally really came together and started to make sense. So I think maybe even just bringing that bass earlier on into the beat, even if you keep it a little bit more minimal during the beginning, and then you start, because slowly over time what happened in this beat was more and more layers got added. They all sounded phenomenal, but I do think for the first half some progression so the audience knows what is even happening was a little bit more necessary. Even if the bass doesn't constantly play, you can sort of duck it in and out, and then during the second half have the full bass line playing throughout the entire second half. That could have been an idea, but I do think there needs to be some progression so the audience does understand what we're listening to for that first half, because I was in the same boat as you guys in the chat where it felt like a little bit confusing what we're even listening to in the beginning. The drums were large and a little bit chaotic sounding with really unique textures, but I do think that definitely does work just because this was meant to be a full-on song by itself. It felt like taking the drums and getting this to fill up a little bit more space and using really odd textures, like a lot of little noises and a lot of static and a lot of hissing, was just a great way to make the beat feel a lot more full, or say make the song feel a lot more full in a lot more of a unique way. So I actually really love the drums in this. I like the different layers that were added to create variation, just a great build up throughout the entire song. But again, just that one layer was needed at the beginning, just so the audience could understand what was even happening. Small little tip here, Neuraldy, you might want to look into using granulizers, so that droning sound that you had throughout the very beginning, definitely a cool texture. But what granulizers can do is take a texture like that and just add a little bit more variation, just because it chops it up into like micro chops and rearranges them and plays them with like different volumes at times depending on what settings you use. So I can take like a very monotone drone sample like that and just add a little bit more movement to it and make it a little bit more interesting. So that's just a little bonus tip if you want to look into that. Overall, I really like this track. I'll say that. Maybe I forgot to say at the beginning. Once everything finally came together, really awesome sound, really awesome unique direction to this beat here. Really, I have no idea what part of the sample was even used, but nonetheless that was phenomenal, and I always look forward to hearing Neuraldy's beats because he takes it to really unique places, and that was definitely yet another case of that. So awesome job, Neuraldy. I think just that one thing that myself and the chat sort of agree on could be a difference maker, but everything else was just phenomenally put together. Awesome. Ooh, we got the Pidgeotto Uncle P up next. Let's see what, did I add Morris onto this? Whoops. Yes, I did. All right, Pidgey. Let's see what you got. right, that was Uncle P's tune there, Toasted Soul. Yeah, I didn't even get a good sense of what the sample was used or how the sample was used there, so that's interesting. So yeah, with this tune, I think the drum programming was very well done. John Sherby says, love the pitch of vocals from the sample. I guess that's what was used there. Works well, great overall fun and slight West Coasty vibe, says the Sherb man. The pad came in for a little while, was a little harsh. The sounds worked, but maybe some EQ work. Nice arrangement and really nice vibe, says Maury. So yeah, I think great drum programming that felt like it had some nice swing to it. I think the sounds that were used in this beat were well placed in terms of how much space was filled up. It was a good diversity of where the sounds sat. I think he chopped the bass line up for it. Oh, okay, interesting. So yeah, I think the bass line itself was really well put together. I think fundamentally though, I had a hard time understanding what I should be focusing on in this beat. Like, what's the POI? What's the sound that really captures me? Just because there were so many sounds that were very loud and prominent. Whether it was those bell sounds or whether it was like the small little pads and synths that came in and out. Yeah, I just had a hard time really understanding like what am I supposed to focus on, just because everything was made very loud. And for example, the bell sounds, those were very prominent in the beat, but they weren't doing anything especially interesting in terms of the actual pattern that was built using them. It just felt like the intent of what this beat was trying to sort of get across was a little bit hard for me to pick up on. I think like Maury said, he had his intention he took away that it was supposed to be like a very West Coasty vibe. I sort of pick up some accents of that, but it was a little bit hard for me to understand overall like what the intent was. John says maybe some slight mixing to help some of the sounds not be as jarring at times. So yeah, I think that would have been something that could definitely help, where, like I mentioned in the chorus, you can only have so many sounds be in the spotlight. If you're going to choose the sort of POI, the sort of sound that you want everyone to focus on and be the really interesting part of your beat, taking the other sounds and making them more secondary in terms of how much frequency space they take up, where they sit in terms of the depth and the, volume control, I think that's going to become a little bit more necessary. And while I do definitely appreciate the arrangement that was sort of built here in terms of just showing off the raw skill of getting from one section to another, I think Uncle P did a great job of building out different sections that really fit in well and sewed in well with the sort of main loop. The sounds themselves that were used in the different sections fit in very well as well. But I do think, once again, what was the intent of those different sections? To me, it felt like I can really hear sometimes when there's a beat and the arrangement is just a way to keep things from sounding monotonous and sort of masking a lack of a core idea. Because if there's something if the core idea of your beat's really, really phenomenal and just so fun to listen to, people don't mind if it's like looped over and over again. And that's one of the things that I sort of pick up on when I'm producing, where if I feel this compulsion to constantly change the idea and constantly create new variations and different ideas for a hip-hop beat, at least I sort of pick up on maybe the reason why I feel this way is because the core idea that I've built here is not all that interesting, and so I don't even have confidence in it to maintain the attention of my audience. So that's why I feel so compelled to make a switch up here and a change up there. So I think that was sort of the idea that, or something that I sort of picked up on with this beat, where maybe the reason why there was so much different arrangement ideas was because Uncle P, maybe you even picked up on the sort of core idea just not being as convincing. So while there was definitely some great production work here, great sound selection, I just think it was just lacking that sort of hook, that core sound, the POI that just really drew my attention in, at least. So a great skill was shown here, but just that core idea of like, what is this beat trying to communicate? I think that was what I would have liked to see, or should I say hear. All right, we got Jesse/Too Hazy up next. Let's take a listen. By the way, thank you guys for submitting as well. This probably was a little bit more of a challenging assignment, but some really unique ideas for sure. I think you guys did a good job of actually pushing yourselves and creating a beat out of this sample, just because I haven't heard like a raw loop used yet. You guys really went the extra mile to create something of your own, which is awesome. All right, that was is that police siren? Oh, I thought that was in the beat. Yeah, that was an awesome beat. I have really very little to say in terms of an actual criticism here. Dark and grimy, right up my alley, says Red Octane. It's a trap, says John. Can see someone on this has a great dark vibe. Not sure where the sample is. I think it maybe those cool effect sounds in the background pan around. Really enjoyed the detail on that. Yeah, you guys, me and you guys definitely connect on our idea of what is going on with this beat. Plenty of room for an artist, in my opinion. I had the exact same idea. This beat was just awesome. I don't have any criticism really. Maybe one small thing I'll point out, but yeah, awesome textures throughout the entire beat. Such a cool, unique way to fill up space in terms of like those percussive, strange noises on the left and right channels. I think you might be right, that might be from the sample, but just such an awesome way to fill up space. Great job of making intelligent choices for the arrangement as well. It's not like he went overboard for the actual hook section. There's a lot more sort of energy, but when he went back down for the actual verse section, it felt substantial enough to the point where I understood, okay, we're at a different section of this beat, but it was very well tied together just because there weren't these huge, insane changes. And that's exactly why you guys felt the same way that I did, which is this is just perfect for an artist. Like, there's enough room for the artist to create their own idea, but also use the different sections of this beat to make a full, complete sounding song. I think this is definitely ready for like an artist to get on. Just a flawless overall idea here, phenomenal idea, awesome beat. I could definitely turn this up. If I was like on someone's album, I'd be awesome. I'd be super pumped whenever this song would come on. The one thing I will say is that what I would do is change that alternative snare that you had at the very beginning and at the middle of the beat, and just chose something that's a little bit more interesting and colorful. So the one that I'm referring to is this one here. The one that starts off at the intro. That doesn't sound too great. Once the actual full drums come in, everything sounds great. Everything ties in together. But I think at the beginning here, when you have so little textures, you definitely do have an awesome loop playing. But I think I would have chosen something that sounds a little bit more unique rather than just a sort of pitched down snare that feels a bit dull and not all that great. So that could be one thing that I probably would have made a different choice on, but that's just a very, very small nitpicky detail. Overall, it's just an awesome beat. So well done. Well done to Jesse. Jesse's always bringing it. I think I'm curious whether Jesse, I don't think I've ever seen him in the chat, or very often at least, but I think he'd definitely be ready to like put his beats out there to work with artists and stuff. All right, we've got 2 people left, and they're both in the chat, patiently waiting. Oh, we haven't had any close calls today. Cora's up next, and then we'll finish off with, who knows, maybe a new person will come and be like, add me to the thing, and I'll be like, oh, fine. All right, let's see what Cora's got for us here. All right, Cora's gonna make us sit and listen to the remaining 2 minutes of just silence. And if you have a problem with that, please direct your complaints towards Cora. So let's just sit here and listen to the remainder of this beat, please. No. let's just go ahead and review it. Great overall idea, but is it just me or some of the elements out of key? Something wasn't sounding quite right and I couldn't figure it out. I had to triple check and they should all be in key. In my opinion, the melody and the pad don't fit well, but the vocal part is really bouncy, says Maury. So yeah, with my take, I think I'm echoing a lot of what you guys are hearing too. I think Cora did a great job of finding the different pieces from the sample and creating his own sort of palette in order to put this beat together. Really, really good job of pushing the sample to really fit your own idea. The drum work was phenomenal. I really, really liked the snare that you used there. That was a very beautiful sounding snare. I think what I'm picking up on personally was that while everything might be in key, overall it just felt like there were just way too many moving pieces in the beat for the first section of the beat at least. So you had a very melodic bass line that was sort of doing its own pattern, and then you had that synth that was also playing and it had a very musical pattern with it as well. And it just felt very disorienting having so many different moving pieces. And I think the reason why myself and Maury mentioned that once the vocal part really came in, it felt like a little bit better. And I think primarily it was because that vocal was just a lot more monotone. It wasn't a very musical piece compared to the synth from the other section. So this goes to what I mentioned in the chorus, which is typically one of the things that can often happen is that we just have way too many moving pieces and sometimes the patterns don't really work with one another, and it becomes more and more necessary to really simplify. Whoopsies. Well, that's what happens when you listen to the full beat. It becomes more and more necessary to simplify certain patterns if you're going to have something that sounds a little bit more complex. So for a very bouncy bass line like Cora had here, that's, in my opinion, the reason why that section with the vocals sounded just a little bit more smooth and the idea came together a little bit more, as opposed to the section that had way too many moving pieces and it just felt a little bit too disorienting. And also to the point that Maury mentioned, that pad felt like it was just somewhat unnecessary as well. It felt like an additional layer that just really didn't add anything. It sort of made the beat definitely feel a lot larger, but it felt a little bit grating. I think that was also used from the sample, but it wasn't necessarily the nicest sounding texture. So yeah, I think the piece of this beat that I really, really actually did like was the part where the vocal sample came in, and it was the beat simplified a little bit and the idea really came together. But I think it was just a matter of a little bit too much going on in the remaining parts of this beat. Yeah, I think that's my takeaway with that beat. Awesome job again with finding the different stems and creating all the different pieces in this beat. Sounds like a lot of work was done to really isolate some of these sounds, and it definitely was a well put together beat, a very clean beat, which is something that can be very difficult when you're using samples and trying to isolate stuff. All right, Maury, will you be chosen, or will some sort of glitch happen maybe? What's gonna happen here? Oh my god. All right, Maury, you are the final winner of today. Let's listen to your beat and then we'll wrap it up. By the way, the next assignment's going to be an extra week. So next week, the course is opening for new members. And I want to give them a chance to submit for the next one. So the next stream is going to be September 11th. That's when the football season starts, actually. So we might move the stream up an hour so I can watch some football and be very selfish. All right, Maury, let's see what your beat's all about here. All right, that was Maury's beat there. Great drum work, says John. Yeah, drum work is great, and I love the radio EQ on the vocals, says Red Octane. Has a very oldies feel to it. Very cool to see a modern sample flipped like it's from the 60s. So yeah, my takeaway with this tune was, like you guys mentioned, great job on the drum break. I think a lot of great choice of actual textures to make the drum break feel so full and robust. I think the snare could have used a little bit extra juice, but overall just a great, very detailed drum loop. That was awesome to hear. The thing with this beat, I think some of the guitar wahs feel a little bit odd though, says Red Octane. Maybe some more structure sample variation to tell the different parts of the song if it's intended for someone to rap and sing over. I think what my takeaway with this beat was that it ultimately lacked something that I would point to as a POI. It just felt like the vocals were almost used as the sort of main focus of the beat for a large part of the beat, but the issue was that pattern got very, very repetitive and it wasn't used in an overly interesting way. It was just sort of a repetitious chop that played in the same way over and over again. The progression, the sort of chord progression, was very simple, and the texture itself was a little bit straightforward as well. So ultimately nothing really jumped out to me as like, well, this sounds like something that's very different and unique than what I'm used to hearing. It was a very simple progression using a straightforward texture, and these sounds in here that weren't very straightforward, like the vocal sample was used a little bit too repetitiously. I just would have liked to sort of, if you're going to use the vocal sample in that way, just push it in a way that makes it sound a little bit more unique, and the pattern itself feels like it just does something a little bit more attention grabbing. Thanks all. Like I said, it's not mixed well and wanted to add some effects. Yeah, fair enough. I think, like you mentioned, this is an incomplete idea. I think a little bit more needs to be added in terms of what can really make this beat special. So yeah, I think that's my takeaway with this beat. Overall though, guys, this was a fun little intimate stream, and we'll be doing the next one in 3 weeks. We're gonna have a lot more new members, hopefully, if I do my job correctly, and we'll have more new blood, so that should be exciting. Thank you guys for showing up, and yeah, if you guys have any questions or anything, feel free to reach out about anything that I said, and otherwise, continue to have a good Sunday, and I'll see you guys in